Farid, what does playing in lion mode mean to you?
Well, it means that when I go compete, we mostly focus on bringing the lion out to play and avoiding anything that doesn't look like the lion.
When you started really applying it and trying to play only lion mode, what were the results?
Second place for over 400K. Then the following week, I had another 220K score. I was just full of scores the whole summer.
Welcome to today's podcast, everyone. Today, I'm joined by Farid Jattin. Farid, let's get right into it. What does only playing in lion mode mean to you?
Only playing in lion mode. Well, it means that when I go compete, we mostly focus on bringing the lion out to play, and avoiding anything that doesn't look like the lion. And we have two names for the, kind of like everybody has, call it a best version, call it a version A, version C. And me and you came up with the name. Well, I came up with it, right? But it was kind of like guided through you. And my best version, we like to call it lion mode, right? And then my C version, D version, whatever that might look like, is called monkey man. So what we're trying to do is mostly come out in lion mode because that's the one that gets, everything going the right way, and then avoid the monkey man.
Can you just quickly share from just a results perspective, what were you able to accomplish this summer? And then we'll break it down to how like monkey mode came into play or when was lion mode there.
Yeah, so this summer I had an amazing summer, man. I had some great results. Thank you very much for working with me throughout the summer. It was an amazing experience for me. And one of the biggest things for me was being able to put a system into place where it basically made it very favorable for me to show up mostly on lion mode and avoid that monkey man that we like to call it, right? We chose those two different names for my different versions that I show up to compete with. And yeah, man, it was just a great experience, and everything about it, the system that we set up was simple, but it was very powerful, man. So yeah, I think we were mostly on lion mode, and the results kind of spoke for themselves.
Can you share some of those results for those listening in?
Yeah, so I think the second tournament that I played was a 5K buy-in, and I ended up getting second place for over 400K. Then the following week or a week after, I had another 220K score, and then yeah, it was just full of scores the whole summer. Very positive summer, and it's actually even to have a break-even summer is very tough out there in Vegas because the intensity is very high, the competition is very tough, and the amount of volume that you're putting in is very, very hard. So I always say that the summers are like the time of the year that most poker players are looking forward to, but it's also the time of the year that at the end of the summer, everybody's mostly disappointed because I would say that 99% of people either lose or break even and most likely lose. And then you have that 1% that actually has a good summer. And I was lucky enough to be part of the 1%. But with that luck came the preparation, which was us working together and putting those systems into place. And yeah, man, I think it was great overall. It was amazing. The focus level was super top, and yeah, I'm just very happy about how everything went.
Cool, man. Congrats on all the success again. So
thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it.
When you say the systems, what does that mean for you? What were the specific things that you say, this is something that really helped me? And if there's somebody else kind of like me who knows that when they're on top of their game, they do really well, whether that's in poker, business, whatever it may be, but sometimes they kind of get thrown off. What were those kind of systems? What were the highlights of it or the key points that for you were really impactful that you think could also help somebody else?
Yeah, so a couple of the things that you could apply to anyone were, number one, very important, right? Where I had originally came into the summer with a big kind of goal, right? Like you had a money goal, you had a maybe a cash percentage goal, you had all these things that are end up being a little counterproductive, especially with something like poker that is tough to predict how much you can actually make or all these things, because in the short term there is a luck factor. There's many things that don't depend on you, right? So one of the things about the system is really focusing on the things that you can control, right? And trying to crush those. Anything else that was outside of that kind of like mindset or that category, just kind of avoid spending too much time with it because you can't really control it, right? So I really like something you said, that 33% is controlled by you, right? 33% is kind of like based on your competition. And then there's 33% that has to do with chaos, God, luck factor, whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever your philosophy tells you. But really, when you could crush that 33% that belongs to you, that you could be a protagonist with, right? That has everything to do with what you could control. I feel like the other 66% starts working a little bit more in your favor, right? And
Yeah.
even when it doesn't, you're okay as long as that part that belonged to you, you were able to do a great job at. So that was one of the things about the system that I thought was very, very powerful, and you could really apply it to anything in life.
So it was in a shift. Like you obviously still wanted to accomplish the goal, the money goals, and the rankings and all that, but it was a shift from focusing less on, let's say, the achieving the goal, but just doing your best to achieve the goal, and that was the primary focus. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think one of the ways you put it into words were aim for the trophy, miss the target. Aim for the target, you get the trophy, right? It's like always just kind of like focus your performance on performing the best of your ability and disconnect from the rest. And yeah, that was a very big thing, man. It was a big relief to kind of like disconnect from putting so much pressure on the money goals or trophies or whatever that might look like. And yeah, and I would have to say that the results are definitely aligned with just focusing on that.
Yeah.
Another thing
So
is that you were able to that we were able to implement where was the fact that you said sometimes less is more, right? Like a lot of times you kind of want to be perfect in every area. But so I was training for a marathon, and then I was trying to get my miles in all while eating perfect and getting these perfect sleep, and it's just not realistic, right? So like when you apply the less is more, and especially in something like a 2 month summer camp, which was what we were calling it, and just focus on the priorities, right? And let go of everything else that could take a step back in the short term. I think it's a very powerful thing, man, because a lot of times we just want to crush 10 things at once, and it really, it gives you a headache, man. It's too much to handle, and to let it click that less is more, especially in the short term where you're working in a small project or a short-term project or a summer camp that has to do with you just performing in poker. Um, and giving those things a little less importance, understanding that in the long term you're going to take care of them, but in the short term they could take a step back. That was a big thing for me too, man, because it just gave me more room once again to focus on what I could control and focus at the task at hand. That's it. That was all that mattered.
yeah, I remember that was our first call ever. Before we actually started
Yeah.
working together, we just had a quick catch up, and you were in an airport. And I remember thinking, this guy has so much on his plate. Like, how is he going to be able to focus? He has so many obligations and so many kind of desires and wills. And what I found is that getting a lot of driven A types to just be like, hey, why don't you do less? They usually don't buy into that. But if we kind of angle it in a different way, we say, why don't you just decide that this is your primary focus for this next upcoming season? And if we word it like that, they're like, okay, this is my primary focus. So I have permission to focus less on other things and just really focus all my energy and just all my time into this thing. And for you, I'm curious, before years prior, let's call it, when you went to Vegas for these 2 month sprints in the summer, were you as mentally tuned in to say, this is my main thing and everything else is secondary, if that? Or was it like, let me just try to like be a winner everywhere kind of vibe?
Yeah, it was more like let me just try to be a winner everywhere type of vibe, and sometimes I was a winner for sure. Usually I've had good results, but it didn't feel smooth. It didn't feel correct. It felt like a lot more than I should be doing, and also there was a lot of friction, man. And this way with the less is more approach, you're kind of just like living a better quality overall life, right? Where it's like you're focusing on the thing, like you see a lot more clear, right? You're approaching life from a better place, not from a place of stress and overwhelm. And this is more like, man, let it be. Let me focus and just pick, for example, picking your tournaments, the high quality tournaments, avoiding the rest. Um, sleep quality should be good, but don't go too crazy. I think another amazing concept, right, that we spoke about was the minimum effective dose of all the important things in your life. I think it's a very
Yeah.
good one because sometimes you don't have time to, like we're saying, right, to crush every area. But at least if you're meeting the minimum effective dose, whatever you define that to look like, you're gonna feel good about it, right? And once again, once you put that system into place, it just makes things a lot easier on those days that like we like to talk about, right? You don't wake up with that motivation, you don't wake up with that drive that you want to, you don't wake up with that energy that you want to. But if you meet the minimum effective dose of things that favor your performance, they favor your state that you want to show up as, it goes a long way. It really, really does, man. And then avoiding all the BS that is not aligned with that, So yeah, it was a big tune, man. It felt like a very mature summer. It felt like a very professional approach. And sometimes in poker, it's tough to do because you don't really have guidance. You don't really have a team. It's just you making decisions. Nobody's really telling you what to do. And when you could put a system into it, I really got to see the power of a good system, and I really appreciate you for that. And I thank you for that.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. So for the audience at home, are you open to sharing some examples of what do you mean by the minimum effective dose? Concrete examples. This is how I approached this, and this way it was very helpful for me to perform because it didn't cause so much stress that I had to be perfect on it.
Yeah, so we had a tracker, right? We had a tracker that it was like a kind of like an accountability tracker, and some of the categories were sleep, nutrition, cold plunging, um, and then it was like what does the minimum effective dose for those things look like, right? So it was like sleep, at least try to get some 6 hours of quality sleep. Cold plunging, the days of competition, I was trying to do at least 7 minutes of cold plunge. Like it's very easy, doable things, right? And one of the very key ones for me this summer was like being effective with your breaks. So I was to do at least a 5 minute meditation, which will get me right back on track on breaks because breaks are very important in poker, but people mostly use them to socialize or to complain or to eat. I was being very, very trying very hard to be as productive as possible on my breaks to, yes, rest a little bit, but mostly reset from all that energy and stress and maybe you might feel a little tired, but just try to reset to the place where I feel like I'm ready to go perform optimal again. And that was a really, really big one, man, because I feel like I was doing breaks better than 99%. And when I would come back from breaks, the edge was just very big. And in poker nowadays, especially at the highest levels, the edge is so small that if you could get little edges like this and that increase your focus and decrease your lack of focus, right? You're being distracted. They really go a long way, man. And yeah, so it was little things like that, and then we were also checking on mental fortitude, right? Like see where I was thinking.
Yeah.
But it wasn't too much pressure in any other categories. It was like you're saying, right? Like minimum effective dose, and I just think it's a good way to approach life if you're a driven individual already, right? If you're someone who might need a little more motivation, then it's all personal. We all got
Yep.
different approaches, but for me, doing a little less and making sure to crush the minimum effective dose, those things were very important and like amazing for me to do.
Yeah. I'll share kind of my perspective on it. Like how you're saying some people are different and some people need different approaches. So there's a concept we talked about, that whole performance pressure bell curve. And you're naturally that kind of person who really puts a lot of pressure on himself to excel. And it could be a very positive thing if it's channeled effectively. If it's just to excel at everything, that's when it can become overwhelming. And that's what a lot of times everyone does. You're like, I want to be, like how you said, run marathons at the same time that I'm playing peak summer at Vegas. Plus, I want to be a phenomenal husband to my wife, like a great brother, all these kind of things. And it's the less is more approach is kind of hard to get people to buy into. But if you're going to say, okay, like what's your primary focus? What's the one thing we really want to accomplish? Which for you was just crushing it at the summer. And then we say, okay, if we had to program, let's say a Farid bot, like these are the actions that'll give you the most likelihood of success. What would they be? then all of a sudden it really clarifies a lot of things. It's like, oh, when I'm on breaks, it's not about socializing or interacting with fans, but it's actually about really just taking my time, doing my meditations, getting my head clear, and getting back into go. And we really, before we started getting into the emotional fortitude part, we just really focused on what would be the main things that would give you the highest likelihood of success just in this small field of really winning the summer. And from there, just when you have that kind of frame and that kind of lens, a lot of things first get really clear on what you should do, and also get really clear on what are the things that are not important right now. And it's a big thing, like right now. You can say, I'll take care of this later, come September, come October. But for right now, what things aren't that important? And for you, I think that was something that in the past you perhaps didn't give yourself permission to, because you just wanted to excel everywhere. You know what I mean?
100%, man. Yeah, I'm somebody who likes to just do everything correct and do everything the right way, right? And that includes being a good family member, being a good husband. Uh, but like you're saying, right, in the short term, you don't need to be Superman. You could focus on the task at hand and give yourself permission to do so. And I think, yeah, that was a big thing, man. Not feeling any guilt around it, giving myself priority, and understanding that it's the best for everybody around me in the long term, right? So yeah, that was a big thing. And once these things click, man, they're very powerful things to apply to any area of life. Like we're saying, this is a poker example, but they really extend to business, competitions, anything, or even relationships, right? So that's why I like the system, because not only was it applicable to this summer, but just to my life in general. And when I apply these little things into subcategories, it's just a nice way to kind of break things down, and also to understand where your strengths are at, where your weaknesses are at, and then yeah, man, take a lot of the pressure off on just trying to be, like we're saying, just that
Mm.
Superman that crushes every area, right?
So I want to ask you about that, because you also mentioned a big word here with guilt, where I notice a lot of high performers, they struggle with that sometimes, where they know what they should logically they know what they would be telling somebody else to focus on, especially if there's an outsized opportunity like you had this summer. But they feel guilty about not doing this or not doing that. And what was interesting is that at the beginning of your sentence you said guilt, and then at the end you said it would be better for everyone. So what was kind of your process on going through that and recognizing, you know what, this is actually okay. I can let this go. I don't have to feel guilty about just focusing on me. Was it the time that there was an expiration date, that it's just for a certain amount of time during the summer? Was it something else? What was it for you?
I think it's something I've been, trying to implement into my life in general, and it's the basically the order of priorities, right? And it's like I've came to the conclusion that when you put yourself first in an unselfish matter, right? Unselfish manner, you're able to give everyone else your best version, right? If you're constantly sacrificing when you need to do or what you want to do for others, yeah, sure, you're pleasing everyone, and you're not feeling too guilty about it because you're doing kind of like what feels like must be done. But at the end, you should feel a lot more guilty that way, because you're sacrificing yourself, you're sacrificing your energy, you're sacrificing your dreams sometimes, right? And once that clicked, that to show up your best version for everybody else, a lot of times you gotta kind of put yourself first and give yourself permission and not feel any guilt about it, right? That lifted a lot of the guilt weight off. And when I speak to people like you that are on the same page with that, it just puts a stamp on the fact that I'm just thinking on the right direction. I think that guilt, yeah, it's a big block, man, when you let it take over, right? Because even in my culture, I'm from Colombia, where not that many people have money, right? And even having a lot of money or winning a lot, there's something in Colombia big. It's all over the world, but in Colombia is a big thing, and it's like a lot of people that are good-hearted or want the best for everyone, but reach a certain level of success, they start having like winner's guilt, like
Yep.
looking at people around you suffering so much, and why me, why this. But if you understand that you're doing things from the right intention, right? You're doing things for the greater good. Um, or you just want to do it for yourself and you feel like you've done everything to deserve what you have, why would you kind of feel guilty about it? So it's disconnecting from the programming that a lot of us have, right? Like growing up and really understanding what part of that programming is actually correct and what part of it is just simply that programming from whether it's society, whether it's people around us who just don't see things the right way, and also, man, interacting and hanging out with people who are gonna guide you in the right direction of thinking. Because if I'm not getting affirmation from someone like you or from, my circle is pretty strong in general. We share these views, but if you're constantly getting views from people who are thinking that you should be guilty or guilt tripping you into things, it's tough. It's tough to snap out of it, right? So the first thing is letting it click, understanding that when you give yourself priority or give the task at hand priority, you're going to be able to do a lot more good for the people that you want to. That might take a sacrifice or might take a little less energy from you in the short term. And then just talking about it with people like this will let you realize that it's actually the correct approach to life. Now, this is just my viewpoint, right? I think that we all have freedom of views, but this is the way I feel about it. And once it clicked, man, it was a lot easier for me to let go of it. And when I've when it clicked, I've been able to see that level of success, like the next level, and I have been able to do exactly what I told myself that I would be able to do, which is be a lot more free, spend more time with the ones I love. But now it's more like putting them into different categories. Like when I'm off, okay, sure, I have time to spend with family, I have time to do this, I have time to do that. When I'm busy, when it's my time, when it's time to work or perform or whatever that might look like. Man, one of the things we did this summer, I had no phone. I was phoneless for 2 months. I had
Yeah.
an emergency phone just for people that, my parents, my wife, but I had no phone. And that was honestly amazing, man. I don't know that I could have done it in the past because I might have felt guilty about it. So it's little things like that, man, that we all deserve to give a priority in certain times of our life and to give ourselves permission to do it, man. I think it's a very powerful thing that I would invite anybody listening to please do.
So first off, thank you for sharing, man. That was very interesting. I want to pull a certain thread here that you spoke about. What I heard listening into you was that you're saying that you have different parts of you that you allow to come out in different times. So when you're just kind of like you called it off, whether perhaps you're back visiting Colombia, you allow that more, let's call it empathetic, caring, and selfless part of you to really be present and to be at the forefront. And then you consciously made a decision that when you're at the tables, when you're playing, when you're in that season in Vegas, that part isn't what needs to come out. What needs to come out is the one that's actually focused on helping Farid perform at his best, so that then Farid, when he's off, can actually provide the best for those he cares about. Is that how you kind of viewed it, or what was your approach to that?
So yeah, man, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. That's exactly what I meant. Like when it's basically, focusing on what you're focusing in the moment. If you're there to socialize, if you're on vacation, I call it just being present, man. Just like whatever is in front of you, make sure you're giving it your all. So if it's a vacation, be a good host. I love to host people, for example. So I take my family to Europe sometimes. Sometimes we'll go to my farm in Colombia, whatever that might look like. I just try to be an amazing host, right? I try to be an amazing family member when I'm having dinner, when I'm, sharing, when I'm talking to my parents about problems or good things, right? Like I just try to be very present. But when it's time to work, man, I'm just not available, and being okay with that, it took me a while, man. But once I understood that it was the correct approach, I have really seen my life gone to the next level, So yeah, man, I know it's something that a lot of us, whether entrepreneurship or high performers or athletes, some of these things we're doing, it's like a lot of people can't relate to it, so it's tough to kind of talk about or relate to. Um, but understanding that it's okay, man, and understanding that it's okay to give yourself priority, it's okay to give these things priority, and that it makes you just better overall. I think it's for me, it's just been like a great approach. It's been amazing to get over that quote unquote guilt, and yeah, man, because of it, whenever I am, playing the husband role, I'm a way better husband. But like I said, like you know this, but when it's time to perform, like we said, we're just maybe not available, and that's fine. And letting people know how you feel, letting people know that it's not personal, letting people know, because some people might, it's good to have these tough conversations, man, with the ones that you love, so that the guilt feels a lot less that way also, right? So it's good communication, and then like you said, man, just giving yourself permission.
Yeah. I think it's such a powerful thing because a lot of people, first off don't know what they're focusing on. So when you don't know what your primary focus is, you're going to get torn in a million different directions because those emotions as guilt, those programmings, all those kind of things, they're going to come into play. And I think for you, what was, when I look at it from the side, what I'm assuming enabled that in a lot of ways was that you were very clear all of a sudden on what you wanted to focus on and when. And because you preemptively made those boundaries, let's call them, very clear with yourself, and you had those tough conversations with others, it enabled you to then be in a place of performance. Because there was no thinking during the poker, let's say like during the tournament days, never in your head was like, wait, should I now be trying to be more present for my family or this? Or no, this is what we ahead of time we agreed. This is my focus right now. So I can give myself full permission. It's not a nagging voice in the back of my head. This is all I'm focused on. And then afterwards, I can focus on that. And I think a lot of times just people don't perform at their best just because they have too many things going on in their heads. They haven't simplified things enough. And guilt is a really, really challenging emotion to work through. And if it's present because you haven't clarified what's okay to do and what's not okay, what you should feel guilty about and what you shouldn't, then it eats people's up. Like it eats their energy away. So further, I want to say, like, I really appreciate you sharing that story, and it makes a lot of sense when you put it in that frame.
Yeah, man. I think the best way I could view it is, I also have a poker coaching business, right, where I coach a lot of students, and I guess at one point, man, so I was trying to be number one in the world at poker, number one family member, number one, brother, number one husband, and number one poker player in the world, right? But I was trying to do all these things at once. And I understood that by putting them into different categories, by finding specific times for each, you could actually be number one for yourself, right? Like let's just say your best version at what every category, but you can't do it all at once, man. So it's like whatever you're doing. I mean, one of the things I like to talk about with my students, and one of the things I give a lot of credit to in my success is I have tried to become a master of my attention, man. So it's like being present, and I have like an attention process, right? So it's like where's my attention at, especially when it's like somewhere I don't want it to be. It's like where's my attention at, right? Especially when I'm going through a problem, I'm going through a downswing, I'm trying to do too many things at once. It's like let's take a step back. Where's my attention at? Okay. And then I go through a process of full acceptance of my attention, right? Even though it's all over the place, I'm not doing, but then it's like, let me redirect my attention to where I want it to be. And that always ends up being to whatever the task at hand is. Once again, whether it is I'm thinking about poker while I'm on vacation, that's a bad thing. Or whether it's that I'm feeling guilty about not hanging out with my family while in a tournament. So
Yeah.
either one, but it's like once you become a master of your attention, you just get to see a lot clearer, right? And you don't let these things build up, man. So yeah, I think that I will close the guilt conversation with that statement.
Yeah, I think you broke it down. I'll say it in a bit of a principle level. What I'm hearing from you is a macro and micro level to that. So on a macro level, like what's my seasonal focus for 2 months? This is the primary thing. But also on a micro level. So just during these 12 hours where I'm playing, this is the only thing I'm focused on. That's the only thing I'm focused on is playing right now. I don't care about the stuff that happens with the family right now. I don't care about the marathon, none of that. It's just this. And then when I'm off, I can go have dinner with the wife. I can really enjoy myself. It's both on a macro level and on a micro level. Now, I want to kind of dive into the next thing. So we said the first thing is that we kind of reprogrammed, let's say, a Farid bot. We said what would be the most effective actions that if Farid took, it would give him the highest likelihood of success. And then what we naturally found, which is always what happens, is that there's an emotional component there as well. That sometimes we know what we should be doing, but that other part of us, like what you called him, the monkey man, pops up at certain areas. And before I get into that, I'd love for you to share what was your experience there, what you found out, what you noticed, and how you were able to kind of manage or mitigate it.
Yeah, so we were able to break it down and see what kind of things, bring out that monkey man or that, that version that you don't want showing up, but does show up once in a while, and it's once in a while it shows up in a way where you can't really control it, right? So we came out with a few examples of things that make it likely for Monkey Man to come out. So whether it's like playing on TV and making a big play that doesn't go your way, right? Or like having an opponent get the best of you for a long time in a row, right? And especially all these things seem to happen a lot more when it's like either at a final table, which is where the biggest pressure's at and where the biggest money jumps are at, or when it's a televised situation. So basically, we're talking about very high stakes, um, and very tough, very tough. Sorry. So yeah, we're talking about very high stakes, right? And very tough situations to deal with that we're not really kind of like prepared to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. So we
Yeah.
had to break them down to see what makes it likely for him to show up, right? So yeah, I really like that. And we set up a system to where once you see him show up or on the way to come play, right? The monkey man, like you see him coming through the door, it's like, what do you do then, right? So we set up a system where like if I could give myself the chance to walk away, whether it's 10, 15 minutes, once again, either do a breathing exercise, do some yoga, stretching, meditation, whatever that might look like that will favor lion mode coming back into play. We would do that, right? But there's certain times where you can't really do that. So what are you gonna do when Monkey Man shows up and you can't do all this? And that's when you go on machine mode, right? So I really like that too. So it's like having a gear where you just let kind of like in this case we're talking about poker, so we just let kind of like a mathematical, simple ABC approach take over because you're not seeing clearly, right? You're
You can't
emotional
trust
right
your
now.
intuition anymore.
You can't really trust your intuition, and your intuition is actually fucking with you because it's like it's going against anything you do. You're judging it from the wrong angle. So what's the best thing to do? Go on machine mode. And once again, this is also a system that you could apply to many areas of life. Um, when the emotions are so strong that you can't control them in a way where, yeah, Monkey Man comes out to play, right? And being able to have a system in place where you kind of just go on automatic and you just take a step back and let it be till you're over it or till something happens that you click back to normal life. That was a huge thing for us, man.
Yeah. I'm curious because you keep going back to the system with the kind of checks and balances. I'm curious from your perspective, how impactful was it, if at all, that we kind of dove in and looked a bit in the rearview mirror just a little bit to understand why is Monkey Man so strong in certain situations? When we talked about the baseball examples and all that kind of jazz, I'm curious, how impactful was that for you, if at all? Did it weaken Monkey Man? Did it make an impact? Or was it just something that for you didn't have that big of an influence?
No, yeah, that was a very big thing. So we had a conversation about the fact that I came to the States seeking a baseball career. I was very young at the time. I was 10 years old, but I came from Colombia where I was in a good situation. I was in a good school, man, just friendly school, good situation, good baseball team. I had a lot of baseball talent. So I came here on summer camp, and long story short, the owner of the summer camp said, I want to build up your talent. Why don't you stay here? I see you traveling. I see you going, at least D1, and let's just take it from there. It's crazy. I was 10 years old, but I made the decision to stay here with my grandparents alone for a year. And that was very tough for me to do, right? So I had to grow up very fast. So I go from being in a
Yeah.
great situation in Colombia to now a terrible public school. I remember the first week of school, some kids spit in my face and called me a spick. These are things I've never even, dealt with in my life. And all of a sudden I got to start fighting. So I understood in this type of school setting where respect was like the number one thing for me, right? So yeah, I had to start kind of like fighting my way into respect, right? And for a man, that's a very important thing, right? So a lot of these things were important back then, but they're non-existent today, right? Like they like it's not like I'm gonna get in a fist fight in a poker game, right? And if it happened, it'll last 5 seconds. It's not a big deal. But exactly, like I'll try to knock him out quick. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But right, there's still a lot of trauma from that, and it's invisible a lot of the time. So there's certain things that trigger that disrespect or whatever that might look like in the poker game that actually takes me back 20, 30 years. Well, not 30 years, I'm 35, but yeah, 20, 25 years, and it's still there, right? So it's like when that's triggered, that's when Monkey Man comes out, right?
Yeah.
And being able to recognize that, yeah, it silenced Monkey Man a lot, and it also makes you, it gives you understanding, it gives you understanding that a lot of times we act a certain way, but it's really not our fault. And a lot of times that's why it's good to go into the root of the problem, right? Rather than trying to avoid it and setting up, like, I don't want to set up the system to avoid the fact that Monkey Man exists. It's just to deal with it in the moment. But the way you make sure that Monkey Man doesn't show up again is to go into the root and have it like we're talking about the guilt thing now. It's like having this click that we no longer need aggression to fill in that
Yeah.
respect as a man, right? We no longer need to feel threatened at the table because someone's going harder at you than they should. Things like that, right? And letting go of that kind of defense system that might show up when you have these traumas or these experiences triggered by a certain act that wakes up that side of you that in general is dormant, so to be able to talk about was relieving, and also to be able to understand that it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, I was able to silence that voice a lot, and when I did see the triggers coming up, I was able to like, hey man, thank you for being here, but not today, and boom, right back into lion mode. Now, way easier said than done. There's some days where, it's
Yep.
unavoidable. But in general, at least you're seeing the problem with clarity. And that was the most impactful thing about the whole thing.
Yeah. The way, can I share kind of how I viewed it from my perspective? How you're
Yeah,
able to process
100%,
it?
man.
So you said it in a very visual way that you would sometimes see a monkey man coming through the door. Now, Monkey Man was probably somebody you developed when you were 10, as he was your protector. That in order for 10-year-old Farid to feel safe, he had to get really riled up and he had to really get aggressive and fight in order to get respect. So he served him very well there. And when you were able to see what was the purpose of Monkey Man and what was the utility of it in that context, when you're sitting at a table and he comes in, you were able to say, I know why he's here. He thinks we're under threat again. But this is not the same context. We don't have to fight here. This isn't, third grade or whatever it may be anymore. So you know what? I get that a part of me spikes him and like wakes him up because we feel like somebody's trying to get the better of us or someone's being very aggressive with us at the table. But actually here in this context, he's not really helpful. He was helpful back then, but here he's not. And I think when you were able to have that kind of lens on it and be able to think, do I want to employ this monkey man right now? Or do I want to go into lion mode, how you called it? It made it more easy to see of not just letting, okay, I feel emotional right now, let's get emotional. but you were able to just take a bit of a step back, take a breath, and be like, okay, is this a valid place to let Monkey Man start running the show, so to speak? And because you had that understanding of where he came from and where he does or where he did serve a certain purpose, you have to say, you know what, this isn't that. Does that kind of click?
Yeah, 100%, man. That's exactly how it went.
And I want to say this to also everybody listening at home. I think the power of how you visualize things, it's a big deal. Like, this is something that whoever I've seen that's been able to do this, they just have more success with it. When they're not able to when they don't just say, you know what, I'm feeling emotional or I'm just getting amped, but they're like, I kind of am the master controller of my mind, and I can see that Monkey Man's just coming in right now. So wait, who do I want to let actually steer this ship? Am I going to just let him come in and sit in the driver's seat? Or am I going to say, you know what, stop here. This is actually not one of the situations that you're needed. Why don't you go back over there? And then I'm going to let Lion Man or Lion Mode go back into the driver's seat. And the system that you keep talking about was just a way for you to notice when he's entering the door. That was the kind of how we noticed, like, okay, what's your breathing pattern? What happens? What are the thoughts in your head? All these kind of things were just signals, like, how can we notice when Monkey Man is starting to enter the sphere, so to speak? And I think it's really powerful that you did that, man.
Yeah, 100%, man. And like one of my strengths is, I'm very flexible, man. Like a lot of people surrender to the fact that, let's just say they have the same problem that I do, the monkey man or whatever you want to call it, right? Um, but a lot of people answer with, "That's just the way I am, and that's just the way I am, and I'm not going to change it, and that's just who I am." And you're kind of you're giving up before the fight even started, And I think that everything is reversible. You could change anything in your life, but some things are way more challenging than others because there's we all got these dark rooms. Some of them are way bigger than others, and yeah, it might take a lot more work, but surrendering to the fact that this is who I am or this is the way I am and I can't fix it, that to me is unacceptable, man. And yeah, that's one of my strengths. And to be able to crush at poker, you need to have this because otherwise you just be triggered every day. I mean, poker as a tool for growth, man, is like it's got to be I don't know, for me it's got to be the best thing because it just tests you so hard every single day, right? And it's gonna make you go into your dark rooms. Like it's not avoidable. So rather than avoiding them, it's like welcoming them and going deep into the root of the problem, no matter how painful or how tough that might look like, because that's where the magic happens. That's where you reach this new version. This is where you reach the next level, right? And yeah, man, I'm always welcoming these uncomfortable situations or conversations, no matter how tough they might be, because I understand that there's magic on the other side. So I would encourage people to try to do the same, man, because a lot of times we want to just say this is who we are because it's a very tough thing to go through. But you could tell me better than I have because you work with a lot more people. But everything you could make it better. Everything you could work at. Everything is reversible. And yeah, it's just some things are tougher than others.
Yeah, it's like, first off, I want to say this. Working with you, I just remember how constantly impressed I was, like how impressive it was, how willing you were able to go into those things and be like, oh, this is what happened. That's what happened. Interesting. And you were able to just be this kind of objective observer to say, oh, that's why Farid is doing that. Interesting. That makes sense. Yeah, I shouldn't be doing that anymore. And you were able to kind of laugh it off. And it was really great to see every time that there was both a willingness to dive into something like that and the lightheartedness to not take it as like, oh, well, like you said, this is the reason why I can't do things and fall into a certain victimhood. And I think that's the real rare blend, being willing to dive into it and then not use it as a justification or as an excuse. Just be like, okay, this is just something that now I can see the obstacle. Now I understand what this obstacle is. So, okay, let me figure out how we maneuver around it, through it, up, whatever it is. And I think that was the real beauty of it, man. And I think, like, again, I want to say this also on the podcast. It was so enjoyable to work with you because you just had no break about going into this stuff and working through it. And I think that's why you always win. Like why you've won before me, why you won after working together, all this kind of stuff, why you're a winner, period. And I just want to say, like, on that level, man, it was just so enjoyable working together.
Appreciate it, man. That was super enjoyable for me, and yeah, I just think we're on the same page, man. We like to kind of go into the deep things that really matter and avoid the VS. But yeah, man. I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. How powerful it is to do the work, to do this work, right? And there's always solutions, but as long as you're surrounding yourself with the right people or seeking advice in the right places, I think this is one of the things I'm most picky about. Is I love to seek advice, but it is so tough for me to seek advice at the same time because I'm so picky where to seek it. So you always want to be having these conversations with open-minded people, with people leading you in the right direction. Because if you were a different way, you might lead me deeper into Monkey Man rather than trying to get me out of it, right? So it's
Yep.
like it is that strong, it is that important with who you're having these conversations with. But please don't avoid them just because they're uncomfortable or tough, and don't ever surrender, no matter what happened to you, to the fact that you're this way and there's no way to fix it. No, that's just not how it is.
Yeah. So, Fred, I want to say thank you very much for coming on, man, and sharing so openly. I would love to hear. So, if someone's listening by now, they kind of know if they see themselves in you or not. Where they're this kind of very, A-type individual. They're trying to achieve a lot. They sometimes take too much onto their plate, but they're also very willing to do the work. For you, what do you think were, let's say, the three main needle movers as far as the things that you did? That you would tell, okay, if you see yourself kind of like me, these are the three main things that I recommend you look into or do in order to make a difference for yourself.
You talking about this summer or in general?
In general as well, in the summer and in general.
I mean, the three main things that we spoke about were, less is more was a very important one, right? And defining what that looks like. I think it's very good to be very specific. We actually had a sheet, me and you, right, where it was like everything put into categories, but it was very specific. So less is more is a very important thing. The minimum effective dose concept, I think it's an amazing one, and using that for every category of your life and separating it from the short term goals that you're doing or short term missions that you're on and your long term just philosophy of life. Both having clarity of what the minimum effective dose looks like is amazing. And then the last thing is, like I'm saying, man, is being present and becoming a master of your attention, because your attention really guides where your thoughts are at, and your thoughts just guide your life, right? And being able to snap out of cloudy moments that we all get into all the time because your mind wants to fuck with you over and over and over, and having a system to get out of it. So I call it being the master of your attention, where, like I said, I'll repeat it again because I think it's powerful. When I'm in a bad state or in a bad zone, where's my attention at? Okay, perfect. Then you go through full acceptance of this moment or this thought or whatever you're going through, but then you redirect it to where you want it to go, right? And if you're constantly doing this, by nature, you're going to be more in a good state than in a bad state, right? And when you're in the better state, it favors your lion mode version to come out, right? And
Yeah.
when you're constantly doing this, having these conversations, and once again, disconnecting from the guilt to being able to give whatever the task at hand priority, no matter what, no matter who's getting hurt, understanding that it's the best for everyone at the end. With a combination of those three things, man, I think life it will improve your life in a good way for sure, man.
Yeah. Cool, man. So I want to thank you again for coming on, man. It was a pleasure working this summer. It was a pleasure seeing you go, and just also like making a new friend and enjoying working together, brother. So I want to say thank you again for coming on the pod. Appreciate it. Any last words you want to say to those listening in?
No, I just want to say thank you to you, man. You're a beast. It was amazing working with you. It's amazing that, like I said, man, I mean, I think the last words will be try to surround yourself with people who speak your same language, who are aligned with the vision, aligned with the goals. Otherwise, it's better a lot of times to be a lone wolf, because if you're not having conversations taking you to where you want to go, then it's taking you in the other direction, and there's always people aligned with you, no matter how unique or weird or how crazy your idea might be. It's like surrounding with people who support that dream, idea, goal, whatever that might look like. It just goes so long, man. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing that I found you, that you speak my same language, and that we were able to come up with the system that, even though if you go back into this podcast and you break it down, it's a simple system, but it's so powerful, man, when you apply it, right? So the biggest things in life are a bit simple but very powerful, and being able to be consistent is just the key to just crushing it, man.
Yeah. So I'll say this, guys. The system that Farid is talking about is what we do with everybody that goes through the arena program. So if this podcast resonates with you and you feel like you could be achieving a lot, sometimes you get in your way, whether it's overwhelm, it's a lack of focus on what the main thing is, you're stretching yourself too thin, or you just sometimes get in your own way. Your version of Monkey Man comes into play. You're welcome to apply to the arena. We'll see if it's a fit for you, and we'll take it from there and help you really win big. Farid, thank you again for coming on, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, my brother.